Hello, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about teacher professional development. My name is Dr. Björn Hassler. Given that I can't be there in person, I thought, well, at least I should show you a picture. So this is me. And in case you're not sure quite who I am, well, here's some red circles to indicate this. This is from some project work that we're doing in Ghana. I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So my talk's about what UNESCO calls the global learning crisis. Many more children are now in school, but they're often not learning the basics. So more effective teacher education is an important way to address this. So why should you be interested, or when should you be interested in this talk? Well, you might be especially interested in this talk if you're thinking, well, we're thinking about reforming the curriculum at our university, at our college, or we're thinking about setting up a new program, maybe for in-service teachers, or maybe there's specific courses where you feel, well, this course, especially in methodology courses, or maybe something associated with teaching practice, needs a bit of a tweak. And hopefully the things that I'm going to talk about will give you some ideas and, more importantly, perhaps some resources that you can use to do that. So let's look at this idea of more effective teacher education. Let's look at some insights from recent research literature reviews and some meta-analysis. So here's some papers on slide 6 that are to do with effective classroom practice. They're not just research, they're research literature reviews and some meta-analysis, and there's also some publications available from our own research. And what this research does, what this literature review meta-analysis does, is it looks at effective classroom practice. What is it that makes a teacher effective in the classroom in order to enable children to learn better? So this work focuses squarely on teachers enabling better learning outcomes for children in school. Now, I won't go into this research literature, but if you look at it, it's quite clear that there are certain themes running through it. And one of my interests is to see how those ideas could be shaped into a curriculum. That is to say, on slide 7, a teacher education curriculum. So in a college of education, in a university, where you have pre-service teachers, what would those elements of the curriculum look like? That is to say, how would you structure the curriculum or parts of the curriculum if you wanted to focus on enabling teachers to teach in such a way that there's better learning outcomes for children? And so going through this research literature, there's some very clear themes. So some of these are listed here. Whole class dialogue, talk for learning, collaborative learning, group work, pair work, better feedback, assessment for learning, the question of equity, inclusion, culture, gender, teaching and learning materials, of course reading, writing, numeracy is very important, metacognition, self-regulation, project work, investigation, and so forth. So these are all themes that if a teacher does good talk for learning, they do good questioning, they're effective at initiating group work with children, they're good at giving feedback to children. All of those things are things that make children learn better. So if that was your aim, well, you would incorporate some of these things in the teacher education curriculum. But it's not just a question of incorporating them. Let's go to slide 8. It's a question of how they are incorporated. Because we all know that lecturing about these isn't particularly helpful. So what you need to do is you need to implement this curriculum. This is the practice, the practical elements of implementing this teacher education curriculum at a college of education. And you need to do that by construing teachers as professionals, developing agency and leadership. We need to move away from the training narrative to a professional learning narrative. The learning needs to be practical and practice focused. So I've got the word interweaving here. That's the interweaving of theory and practice. That is to say, teaching practice, alternating teaching practice with inputs that happen in college. And then student teachers go out to school, they do some teaching practice, they come back into college. And these are quite short cycles. This is not having a whole year of teaching practice at the end or a whole semester of teaching practice. This is kind of an in-out, in-out, in-out model. There needs to be reflective dialogue. There need to be appropriate learning resources and so forth. And so if you look at all of that research, you'll see more about this. And I'm sure many of you are really familiar with this already. So let's go to slide 9 and talk about some of the programs that we have that implement some of these ideas. And these are all open programs. The resources from these programs are all freely reusable. So the first one is OER for Schools. This is something that we developed through the Center for Commonwealth Education at the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge. It is based on a 5-unit teacher curriculum, where this teacher curriculum is derived from those broader considerations. So these 5 units include things like whole class dialogue, group work, assessment for learning, and so forth. It's 28 two-hour sessions. The program is usable with and without technology. You can see some technology here in the images, but it's not necessary to use technology, but you can if you have it available. There's lots of video materials that support reflection. Video is very important as a tool for that, so we have a lot of video. The program was developed and trialed in Zambia and South Africa, and it was then further developed in a number of other countries. It's there online, www.oerforschools.org. You can go and have a look at it. Here is what you would see. This is from the first session. You see this is the introduction to the program, and you see these big red boxes, and these big red boxes are notes for the facilitator. So it's not just that there's materials there for, say, the student teachers or the in-service teachers, it's that there's materials there also that support the facilitator, which is very important. The facilitator needs their own professional development in order to be able to facilitate these sessions effectively, either for student teachers or in-service teachers. I'm using some of these terms a little bit interchangeably. I'll explain that at the end. Let's look at the next program, the TTEL program. Again, it's an open educational resource, and the materials are there for reuse. Here you see on slide 13 a map of Ghana with the 40 or so colleges drawn in. It's about 1,800 tutors with roughly 40,000 students. These are all students of teacher education doing the basic diploma in education that enables them to be a primary school teacher. Now the program is multi-stranded. There's lots of different elements. There's tutor professional development, leadership and management, institutional change, for instance looking at the curriculum, there's gender components and so forth. I'll talk more about the tutor professional development program. This is how the Tutor Professional Development Program works. There's weekly professional development sessions in all of those colleges of education, and they're peer facilitated by tutors acting as professional development coordinators. We have a TPD framework, which you can see here. There are 12 themes. They're aligned and derived with those themes identified in the research literature, and in each of these 12 themes, we have 5 teaching strategies that are equivalent to a workshop. Let me just go back to slide 14, where you can see that the program is across 3 years, so 6 semesters, 2 themes per semester, so it's 10 sessions per semester that are covered there. There's support available from 5 coaches, and there's also induction workshops for the professional development coordinators. Now, this is a national program, but you could just as well do a program like this at your own college, at your own university, if you wanted to offer professional development for your tutors or lecturers. So let me go forward to slide 15 again. Here you see the book covers for the 12 themes. We haven't developed all of those yet. We have the first 4, the next 2 are just about to come out, and they're all available on the website. Now here's just a screenshot on page 16 where you see just some elements of the books. We're trying to make them as friendly as possible. There's graphics, there's local images, and so forth. Alright, so there's lots of various interesting aspects of TTEL. We have an interesting materials production workflow. We use ICT and digital technology for lots of different things. Again, as for OER for Schools, we're using video and so forth. So all of this is up for discussion. If you want to find out more, very happy to discuss it. Let me come to almost the last slide, slide 18, just to try and summarize this talk. I've used some of the language between pre-service and in-service somewhat interchangeably because these materials have different versions. So for instance, you could use these materials, and that's what we're doing in TTEL, as a program for lecturers or for tutors. So there's a handbook for the facilitators, the PD coordinators, and a PD guide for tutors. So the tutors, your lecturers, get the PD guide, the facilitators have the handbook, and then you can run a large number of professional development sessions on any of these themes that will help the tutors to teach more effectively, to have improved learning outcomes for the student teachers. We also then have a version in the program for student teachers. So we're doing professional development with the tutors, but then the tutors, as they go into the and run the college sessions, the college classes, well, they need to do something with the student teachers. So we have a handbook for tutors and then methodology books for student teachers. And these are for college or university-based sessions for student teachers. So this will be pre-service, will be methodology type materials, but we envisage these materials to be used in conjunction with teaching practice. So the materials aren't really a kind of a lecture course, but they're more a series of workshops. But that's what makes them effective. So it's difficult to lecture some of this. But if you use it in conjunction with teaching practice, then you have a very interesting program there that will impact on the learning outcomes for primary and secondary pupils. Now in the last column you see, well, you could also use some of these materials, and some of the tutors at the colleges are doing that, as a program for teachers. So for instance, some of our college tutors in Ghana are working with the teachers in the demonstration schools, because if the student teachers go into those demonstration schools to practice, well, the teachers there also need to have the right methodology at their fingertips. So some of the tutors are going into those demonstration schools or in other schools where the students go for teaching practice, and they use a handbook for facilitators and a PD guide for teachers. So these materials are very, very flexible. You can use them in lots of different ways, and I hope that this has given you some inspiration in case you're interested in doing something similar. So if you're thinking, well, maybe I would like to run some professional development program towards improving the interactive teaching skills of the teachers at my college or university, or maybe we're rethinking the curriculum, we'd like to do something that's more practice-based, something that gives teachers better skills for actually teaching in the classroom and thereby improving learning outcomes for pupils, we would love to hear from you. So if any of that's of interest, I'm very, very happy to have a chat with any of you. Just drop me an email, or technology permitting after this talk, we can have some initial discussion. So, right, that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your time. And I hope that some of you will get in touch to see how we can take things forward.